I work as a highway driver and have a strange set of rules to follow. Part 4. Written by LiroxtronIV. I'm sorry for the long absence. I fell into a coma while on the job and couldn't write. Maybe I'll tell you about it another day. Anyway, I'm a highway driver and I have strict guidelines to follow for the sake of my survival on the road. If you're new, I'd recommend listening to the previous parts. They're available in the card in the top right. Anyway, here's part 4. Holy crap! I screamed, swerving to the left to avoid the figure. In my attempt to avoid what was possibly a mere ghost, I ended up crashing straight into the concrete barrier and was smacked in the face by the hardened airbag, which had never seen use until now. At this point, I was knocked out for a good minute or two. I woke up in a daze, inhaling the smoke rising from the busted engine. Cutting the airbag, which had been obscuring my vision, with a shard of plexiglass, I realized there were figures now surrounding the vehicle. Upon further inspection, they resembled members of my family, my friends, and my dog. My brain was still foggy. I wasn't able to tell if it was a dream or not. At this point, I probably forgot that I was even a highway driver. I urgently tried getting out of the car to no avail, since the doors wouldn't budge. My crush from high school walked out of the fog created by the smoke of the patrol car, now moving towards me. I was flabbergasted. She then lunged at the car, emanating a screech akin to a fox. That alone snapped me back to reality, and I now realized how truly effed I was. With the figures now completely surrounding the vehicle and scraping the body of the car with their nails, I radioed management. Frogman's 1 to CC. I'm at 66 kilometers and I'm surrounded. I stuttered near asphyxiation until I was interrupted by the near instantaneous reply. Understood. Ashura team is on their way. The voice said, clearly aware of my predicament. Aside from the screeching, I could hear a growing whirring sound of a helicopter. All of a sudden, the thunderous roar of heavy gunshots rang out, and the figures that once surrounded the car turned into a red paint job on the vehicle. I could remember wetting my pants in absolute shock from the recent sights. Through the busted sunroof, I saw 3 men rappelling from the hovering helicopter, clad in black armor. HSA Extermination Division was printed on the back of their vest. Seeing the wounds on my glass-filled arms, they got me out of the vehicle and rappelled back into the helicopter. Looking down from above, I caught a glimpse of another patrol vehicle coming out from the concrete wall beside the highway, now passing by the flaming car. Unbeknownst to me, that was the replacement officer finishing my shift. The moment they laid me down on the floor of the helicopter, one of the men tended to my wounds. At this point, I could barely feel a thing with the amount of adrenaline flowing through my veins. Looking at the badge on the guy's arm, it read, Ashura's Legion, with the phrase, strike like demons with God's will, encircling the title. I couldn't care less, really, considering that I was bleeding out. What happened after that was hazy. Straight after the medic injected me with a needle, I was knocked out like a baby. I awoke on a hospital bed. One of the Ashura operatives, along with someone who I presume was a doctor, was in the room with me. The doctor immediately went outside once he saw me sitting up, and the other guy spoke to me. I'm gonna spare the details, but he was a member of the HSA Extermination Division assigned to Hawk 2, the code name for Ashura's Legion. My situation was dire enough that they had to send in what is presumably the special forces to save my ass and send in a replacement driver. As it turns out, due to my condition where I was incapable of delving further into the highway, another driver was needed to ensure my shift was finished. If it wasn't, well, all hell would have broken loose. And knowing the hellish occurrences here, I sure as hell didn't want that to happen. Now, more info on the Hawk 2 squad. The HSA Extermination Division Hawk 2, designated Ashura's Legion. Their motto, strike like demons with God's will. Their manpower, 2 teams, 6 members each. Some additional info. They were formed after the complete annihilation of Hawk 1. And that's all that I can share. After staying in the ward for a few days, my wounds weren't all that bad. I immediately went back to work. I was lucky enough to not have to go an exorcism. My predecessors were not so lucky. During my stay, I heard stories from the other injured drivers in the ward who were brought in from other highways across the country. The agency has a central medical center. One of them had been serving for about a decade. His name was Theo, probably the most experienced in the room. Now, there's a well-known story that is spread among the HSA drivers and subsequently the rookies. Hell, it's probably not a story anymore, but rather a true event considering how things are here. A few years ago, one of Theo's colleagues, a newbie to the job, had a malicious encounter with the voices that one would encounter near the start of their shift. These voices, though friendly at first glance, were selective in who they wanted to interact with. This guy was no exception. Though, this time, they had ill intentions. The guy was reportedly mocked and verbally harassed by them through the course of the entire kilometer, and that alone was capable of breaking him. The devilish laughter that erupted within the confines of the car would constantly replay in his head, even to this very day. Nobody knows why, but these supernatural entities seem to leave their prints on anyone who dares to tread on the roads. And their effects linger on for God knows how long. So HQ immediately knew that something was off with him when he wouldn't respond to any of their callouts. So they forced him off of his shift and sent in a replacement soon after. The details were a bit barren, but it stated that he had to be exorcised by priests of all 3 of the major religions hired by the HSA. The entire time I was hearing whatever came out of Theo's mouth, I believed every single bit of it with no hesitation. Theo had his own personal crazy experience, one that had landed him in the ward at that point in time. It turns out that he was from a branch in charge of surveying the Golden Gate Bridge. Not necessarily a highway, but in this job scope, well, anything's possible. Though his shift was miles shorter in comparison to mine, the amount of anomalous events were significantly higher than what I would encounter. Imagine this. I had to get through 100 kilometers facing about 50 events throughout the shift. Theo, on the other hand, had to travel about 3 kilometers while facing 1,000 events happening simultaneously. His shifts happened irregularly, about once a year. But when they come, the HSA make immense preparations to ensure whatever they face won't get any drivers killed within the first few minutes. I've heard that the patrol vehicle that he's equipped with is a high-tech APC, which carries a full team of HSA Extermination Division agents and is fully loaded with heavy armaments, each of which is manned by an agent. Theo, technically, is just a driver for them. His shift, which happened a week ago, cost him his left leg, and it left him partially deaf in his left ear. It's a good thing that I was on his right side in the ward. If not, I would have gone crazy. Anyway, traveling across the bridge, he had to fend off swarms of entities which, as he said in his own words, came from the pits of hell. Theo's APC, which got mangled and had a literal hole in its right side of the driver's cockpit, managed to get through most of the entities. However, there's always a surprise on the job, and one of them was a meet and greet with Death himself, just barely missing what would have been a fatal job injury. A Titan-sized entity came out from the ocean and stomped its foot on the APC. Though Theo was swift enough to evade it, unfortunately, a section of the APC was hit. The back of it was smashed, compacted into a rubbish cube. The personnel at the back were crushed into a pile of red, oozy sludge that made Theo sick to his very core. Out of the 7 in the team, only 2 of them made it out alive, Theo being one of them, obviously. They somehow skimmed their way back to the end and finished the shift. They have no idea how they didn't get slain by the numerous entities. The rest of his stories seemed boring to me, so I just slept through most of them. I heard him mention something about a janitor, but I was dozing off by then. Once I was fully healed up, I got back on shift. As dire as my situation was, money was the only thing I could chase. So I'm heading into my second shift. Maybe I'll finally conquer my fears of this highway and see what lays ahead of the 75-kilometer mark, which I've never gotten to see.